begin with Pakistan's economic outlook in 2024 and its relationship with the IMF. There is a new tranche of $700 million US under the existing $3 billion standby arrangement with the IMF that is to be dispersed by the IMF, but this will be decided in one of the meetings that is going to happen on the 11th of January. It has been confirmed. There was a lot of speculation as to when this meeting will be held with the IMF, but now it has been posted on the IMF's website that meeting concerning Pakistan and the disbursement of the $700 million tranche will be held on the 11th. A lot of important points to discuss regarding Pakistan's relationship with the IMF, and without further ado, let's take you directly to our guest who is in the studios, Dr. Usman Chohan, a leading political economist and somebody who I feel extremely comfortable with discussing economy. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. Usman, the IMF board is to review Pakistan's tranche on the 11th of January. Why are certain sections making deliberate speculations on the relationship of Pakistan with the IMF?
I think that the root of the speculations is that they may have a vested interest of some sort. For example, you may have observed that the stock market is on highs. These sorts of things are based on sentiment, so if you can throw a wrench in that sentiment, you may gain from the opposite trade. But the IMF was intending to post this on their website. They do have a date now, January 11th. $700 million is on the line pursuant to their evaluation of their executive board of our performance, which, as you and I know, has been stellar. The government has done a very good job in terms of addressing the key requirements that the IMF wanted.
Now, speaking of the IMF on its website has also talked about the economic projections for Pakistan, and it depicts a challenging outlook for the year 2024. What are the different factors that make that outlook challenging?
Excellent question, because this is where the difference between what the State Bank is projecting and what the IMF projecting come to the fore. So the IMF is forecasting a contraction of minus 0.5%, whereas the State Bank has a positive GDP indicator. And I think the main difference that arises is on the presumptions of inflation. Inflation has been very high in emerging markets over the last 2.5 years. In Pakistan, the last figures approximate around 30%, less than that, of course, but above 25%. So now the question is this going to taper off globally? There are reasons for us as observers of the world to worry that the energy prices might be higher next year. For example, with the conflict that is happening in the Middle East and the routes that ships now have to take around the Horn of Africa, etc., those are concerns. But then at the same time, interest rates are likely to fall. And the US interest rates have been a big, you can say, parasite in terms of calculating the interest rates of every other country based on that. So it could go either way. But if the IMF suggests this, it must be because it assumes that inflation is going to be high, whereas the State Bank is projecting outwards and therefore is going to have a policy rate impact, is thinking that it's not going to be so bad.
All right, Usman, there is also a lot of discussions on policies to strengthen macroeconomic stability in Pakistan. What are the factors that have been impeding macroeconomic stability in Pakistan, and what needs to be done in the fiscal year 2024 in order for Pakistan to come out of the little lull as far as its economy is concerned?
Yes, well put. The little lull has been there, and we've witnessed it since 2022. Part of it is exogenous, global prices, conflicts, all of this creates uncertainty. The higher interest rates in the US meant that capital flew from countries like Pakistan or Egypt back to the United States. That's not likely to continue in my judgment, so that's a positive thing. But then there's endogenous things that we have to look at in terms of the macroeconomic stability that you mentioned. One is the budget deficit, and on the budget deficit side we look at revenue collection. The IMF had stipulated a target of 4.4 trillion. We attained it in excess, we beat that target by 40 billion. So that's a good sign.
43 billion to be exact.
43, exactly right. And that equates to about 1% of the target, which is a good thing that you beat. If you needed 100%, you got 101%. So that's a very good sign. Then there's the current account deficit, but again, energy prices and other things impact that. And we also need to start driving exports, which is something that you and I talk about frequently. So if you have these things put into place, I think that puts in a sense of calm for the IMF, expecting us to achieve the minimum stability so that in the long run we don't need the IMF, and that's what they want.
Let's talk about the consumer price index this year as well. This is also something that the IMF is a bit concerned about because it is related to inflation, and there are different varying statements concerning inflation in Pakistan. How important is Pakistan to structure its economy around its consumer price index?
This is an excellent question, because the key word you've put is structure. So for example, the way we have designed our cities, we require petrol, which is imported. But if we had public transport and other options, we wouldn't need that energy requirement. Similarly, the way we have chosen to heat things, or the way we choose to cook, or the way even the oil we use, all of these things have an import factor. So inflation is actually imported from other places. So if we redesign these as essences of our economy, we won't be so dependent on the mercurial vicissitudes of the global economy, because fundamentally Pakistan's outlook should be positive. The reason being is that you have a positive population growth rate, you're making important infrastructure investments, you're playing a careful role in a increasingly tense world. You were being prudent, we're not taking sides. Everything is now auguring towards a better future for Pakistan, insofar as we deal with ourselves. But we don't live on an island. We are part of a bigger world. That's the problem.
All right, now that the day is coming near for the 11th of January for the IMF to decide when it's going to disperse $700 million, a lot of people are also speculating that once this tranche is dispersed to Pakistan, the next tranche that is supposed to be dispersed in March will be an easy go as far as Pakistan is concerned. Why is that?
Because the initial part of any exam tends to be the hardest when you're focusing on how to do things. The initial part was this July to December portion, and there were tough decisions to be made, as you well know, and our Minister of Finance has been very sober about what needs to be done. So this is a very good sign. So that was the tough part of the exam. Now we're in the middle, and now the meeting is announced. I am confident that this tranche will be released, because I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. And that therefore the final thing is just a little swipe on the examination paper. And that's good. My concern is, of course, that we, as our Minister of Finance has suggested, we may need to go again for a new program. That increases the dependency that you alluded to in your opening remarks, that we have gone to the IMF before. And so what is the long-term connection? That's
Usman, we've had 24 arrangements with the IMF since our relationship with the lender organizations began in 1950, and now you yourself have pointed towards the fact that we want to go towards another program for economic stability in Pakistan. Is there any possibility, maybe in the longer run, for Pakistan to come out of this whole circle of dealing with lending organizations such as the IMF?
Yes, there is no other way. In the long run, we have to be a self-dependent economy, at least for the basics. There is no other future. And the path to that requires certain important structural changes. And we've discussed some of them, like the energy or the nature of our economy. But it also requires a different mindset, because it is very comfortable to go to the IMF, particularly in a tough situation, and have them tell us what to do. But it is important for us to think through how our economy should be run for our good, and then how we can help the world, be a positive force in the world. Pakistan has always had this mindset that we have to help other countries, so we have to put that into practice one day. And IMF will always be a detractor from that, because it has ideology, it has politics. It has to show the world that it's actually relevant. More and more countries are weaning themselves away from this anyways. In the long run, who is the IMF going to sell its grain to? Africa and us, and even Africa is developing. We'll be the last ones on the table, and then we'll be tired of it too. So I don't see a future for multilaterals in any case.
Nathan Porter, the IMF mission chief to Pakistan, is quite satisfied with the way Pakistan has restructured its economy around the IMF policies. Now, he says that the actions and policies of the current government reflects its commitment to steer the country towards stabilization. How important is this steering towards stabilization once the elections are over and done with and a new government comes in place?
Well, you're absolutely right. So the most important thing is that the next government sticks to this trajectory. We require in Pakistan a continuity across governments. Every time we have a change of power, we have a new visit from the IMF and a new discussion as if this country was invented yesterday. But it isn't. It is the world's 5th biggest country, and it needs some trajectory to go on, not disrupted so often. And so if the IMF chief is happy right now, or the country head is happy, that is a good sign. But we want, in every agreement we have of this kind, whether the IMF, whether another, that there is a continuity so that we can reach the target that is agreed to in the first place.
Usman, you talk of targets. There are targets that the lending organizations, put into ask or request us to implement, but there are targets that our country also needs to do in order to stabilize itself economically. The fact is also that we've heard so many governments talk about Pakistan wanting to be an export-based economy. How can Pakistan achieve that and balance that out with the lending organizations?
Yes, well, the first thing is actually not export, is to meet our own national demands. For example, we produce 25 million tons of wheat. That is a huge amount, but we are a huge country, so actually we end up importing food. So you have to make sure that your needs are addressed, and then you look for exports, because oftentimes we make difficult trade-offs. For example, in agriculture, and we're an agricultural producing country, we have to export to gain foreign revenues, but we also need those commodities at home. So I believe that you have to at least satiate local demand to maintain social cohesion, and then you export the surplus of that, and the surplus of that goes with large-scale investments, either irrigation, water management, climate resilience. Those types of things are the most important, not just for agriculture, but also for industry and also for services. So you have to have a more sustainable and sustainability-oriented mindset. I think this is the key here.
Usman, the ongoing SBA is going to expire on the 14th of April this year. By that time, we'll have a new government in place. How many eyes are on Pakistan and its following of the policies as described or aligned by the IMF?
All eyes are on us, because even other countries that have engaged in bilateral assistance to us do expect fiscal discipline and for us to have a trajectory. The countries that have been most prominent in sharing our burden with us, standing shoulder to shoulder with us, include China, Gulf countries such as Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. These countries also believe that Pakistan should adhere to what it has agreed to with the IMF, and they want that as a cushion when they engage bilaterally. So Pakistan has to go from dependency relationships towards being mutually beneficial. We have to find ways that we can be helpful to China, we can be helpful to Kuwait, and so on.
All right, Usman, you talk of physical discipline. I like the word physical discipline because I think discipline is something that we really need in our lives, in any sphere, whether it be fiscal or otherwise. Do you feel that in the coming months, Pakistan or Pakistan's government will have to deal with elements that are trying to destabilize Pakistan's economy with an iron fist?
Absolutely, I do believe that, and I love how you put that, because you've seen the signs of this in the last few months, where, for example, currency speculation was dealt with an iron fist, and the rupee is exactly where it was then, rather than continuing a downward trajectory. So you see how vested interests can have such a disproportionate impact. Your personal rupee or dollar holdings were impacted by those speculators sitting there. The same can happen with the stock market, the same can happen with key industries. So iron fist is good as long as it is just and it's in the national interest. You don't want to replace one vested interest with another, and that's of course what we wouldn't want. We want to create public value for the public at large, which encompasses our people and not illegal migrants or not overseas companies that aren't dealing in a fair manner, or other agents.
Or the holders, for that aspect.
Or the holders, which create a big problem, absolutely. So discipline is a key principle, and it's one of the three of Pakistan's foundation.
Another important aspect is also the ease of doing business that we've discussed many times in the past as well. The role of the SIFC, I feel, is very paramount as far as that is concerned. Do you feel the SIFC will continue to play an important role, and this will go in Pakistan's favor as far as its relation with the IMF, the World Bank, or other lending organizations is concerned? Yes,
it might. It might, because we need some vehicle that gets us to achieving the ease of doing business targets. The SIFC may be that, but if for that to happen, then it has to work in conjunction with everything we have. You see, we have a very large government architecture, which people in general are not aware of. Even you and I don't know the full scope of it. Perhaps nobody does. So you have to have all of government on one page. Now, is the IFC the key to that? Perhaps, but then all the other ministries, departments, and things that have been created over 75 years have to be on the same page, and you may note that there are some, we may notice that there might be some redundancies. So having an efficient, tightly run ship in government is also important, because when we talk about revenue collection, that's just one side of the equation. We also have the expenditure side, and to achieve fiscal discipline, you don't just have to squeeze the revenue side, because that's squeezing you and me, essentially. Salaried people. You certainly have to look at the expenditure side. Why are we doing it, and how are we doing it? This is where performance audit matters a lot, for us to check what is being done, because it's one thing to do things right, but it's one thing to do the right things, and we have to make sure we are doing the right things in the right way.
I mean, it's a very thin line, but the fact remains that we need to remain at the right side of that line in order to not only appease our own people, but also stabilize our country and strengthen the relationship with lending organizations such as the IMF, because we've had a very long-standing relationship with it since 1950. This said, what do you feel, how important is the role of the captain of the ship as far as Pakistan's economy is concerned, which means the Minister of Finance? I really applaud, I want to on the record applaud Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, for the way she has handled Pakistan's economy during the caretaker government. How important will it be that her successor, male or female, be as competent as she has been?
Yes, I share your perspective and your sentiments towards her, because she has maintained a sobriety. She manifests in her body language a sense of exhaustion at the task, but she still does it. And this is very admirable, because her task isn't easy. So one feels tired trying to lift things up, but then you actually do carry that weight and move forward. So I appreciate how she has been steadfast and very sober, that this is what you have to do. It doesn't matter what anybody is saying. If this is what we have to do, then this is what we have to do. And the other future finance ministers, they, him or her, will have to maintain the same sobriety when dealing with the economy, because this is a very sober
and passion and you know, zeal towards doing the right thing at the right time, within the right you know, speculations, so that you know the results are how should I say, to say the least, fruitful.
Yes.
Putting that into perspective, how do you feel Pakistan is going to move forward? What are the impediments that you feel Pakistan currently has, locally, regionally and internationally? And how do you feel Pakistan can steer out of it in a manner that could be beneficial for everyone?
Yes, it isn't an easy task for any country. So Pakistan is not unique in its problems. I see this everywhere, because that is my job, to observe the global economy. And so the fact that we have such a competent finance minister, a competent team beneath her, as well as other institutions taking things seriously, is a huge plus. The sorts of things that they have indicated, they sort of gravitate around the idea of reviving the economy. And the sorts of things that they have enunciated mean that they see the problem as it stands, and they want to jumpstart it. And I totally agree with the sorts of things that they have prioritized. Things that our government cares about are long-term in nature now, which I think is a huge plus. They care about, for example, developing our capital markets. That is a very huge thing for us, because you and I should all participate in global, in national financial development. They care about infrastructure. They care about making sure that privatization occurs in an effective manner, to have these assets create value even after they are privatized. They care about public-private partnerships. This is actually what every country is grappling with, and I think that the fact that this government, and even in its caretaker capacity, has pointed these things out and is working towards it while adhering to the constraints set by the IMF, they're doing a remarkable job.
You talk of long-term. Again, I'd like to revert to the fact that a lot of times what happens in different countries is that when a new government comes into place, it normally just tries to change the policies of the previous government. Whether it's to its detriment or not is another question altogether. But when you talk long-term, how important is that long-term continuity of economic policies by the successive governments important for Pakistan?
Absolutely. So I think that there's two factors to that. There's the carrot and the stick. The carrot is that it would be nice if we had continuity. The stick is that the IMF is going to make sure there's continuity. So the fact is that you could do this in you could do this the easy way or the hard way. And I think the easy way is to get all stakeholders on board and make them recognize that their private interest cannot supersede the national interest.
True.
Otherwise, the hard way is that the IMF's conditions will be even tougher next time, and the continuity is going to be there. I'm more and more confident.
I'm sure the IMF is going to oversee that Pakistan does the needful, as it has been doing. And I think the SBA itself was a wonderful initiative that the previous government managed to have, and now the caretaker government has managed to continue with the same policies that the IMF had. And let's see what happens after the elections. Nevertheless, we are all waiting for the 11th of January and what the outcome of that will be. But I think in my point of view, is going to be positive. Your last comment on it, how optimistic are you of the tranche coming to Pakistan in the month of January alone? My
final comment would be that I'm extremely optimistic, because as we said, the exam has 3 parts, and the first part was the hardest, and we've gone through that and done that with flying colors, got 101%. Now the second part is formality, and the third part will be a formality as well. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, political economist, who have joined us in the studio and talk about the IMF-Pakistan relationship, and of course, all eyes on the 11th of January, where the meeting of the IMF is going to happen regarding Pakistan's next tranche of $700 million for under the SPA, of course, and then there is one more tranche that is going to be dispersed. Thank you so very much, Usman, to have joined us.